I am happy to say that we have Mel Tidwell to talk with us today. Mel is replacing our scheduled speaker, Ike Parker, who unfortunately was diagnosed Christmas Eve with COVID. Prayers for Ike. I did not prepare an introduction for Mel. Instead, I'm going to read you what he wrote for me because I haven't known him long enough to add embellishments, except to say that he is one incredibly good chef and bartender. Melvin was born in Lakeland, Florida. He lived on a small family farm and was a dedicated musician all through his school years, and then he joined the Navy at 18. After training, he was stationed on a submarine in Hawaii, lucky fella. 10 years later, he left the Navy in Jacksonville, Florida. That same year, he began working for Lockheed Martin. Except for a couple of years at the end of the 1990s, he finished his career with the Navy 25 years later in Huntsville, Alabama. He and John then moved to their home in Blue Ridge, Georgia, full time. Mel now spends his time cooking, gardening, and cleaning the crappers at their Airbnb, and taking care of John. Please welcome our own Mel Tidwell.
Well, good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. I made a promise before I started that I would send out a blessing. So here's some glitter, sprinkles, New Year, happy goodness. Take it all in. Before I start, I do have a few longtime great friends on Zoom today. I want to thank them all for joining me. Thank you. So with the new year, so begins a new you. I want to begin with an article on lifehack.com written by Dr. Michelle Millis Chappell. She says, many people, maybe you, stopped following their passion and purpose way too early in life because their talents were ignored, minimized, or shamed. So you didn't have the chops to win an American Idol competition or nab an Olympic gold medal. So then you stopped expressing your inborn gifts altogether. You don't need to be an award winner to rock your life. Living your dream life is about discovering your superpowers and feeling vibrant and joyful when you use them. It's about owning what makes you unique and finding like-minded people to support you. Okay. So while writing this talk and exploring how we become vibrant and joyful, I came across innumerable quotes and articles stating to have a fulfilled life, you must have a purpose. Hell, the American author Robert Byron once observed, the purpose of life is a life of purpose. And Dostoevsky is quoted as saying, the mystery of human existence lies not in just staying alive, but in finding something to live for. Are we sure about this? There's all this mishmash about how in order to get what you want, you have to choose one direction and move towards it, constantly improving over a prolonged period of time to achieve something. Heck, there are copyrights and bestsellers and royalties galore based upon it. A purpose-driven life. Did all of you have a plan? Did you know you would go to college and get married and have children? Were you even remotely prepared for what was to come? Perhaps you were with that high school sweetheart to this day. Maybe you knew the military was for you. There is nothing wrong with living a life with a single purpose. But so many of us sort of wander through our life by accident. That's been my path. As I reflect on it, I can say that that's okay. According to Oxford Languages, the definition of accident is an event that happens by chance or that is without apparent or deliberate cause. Similar words are chance, coincidence, fluke, serendipity, fate, providence, happenstance, just to name a few. I think they should add opportunity. In biblical stewardship at Taylor University, they teach that in life, we can choose one of two strategies. We can either live our lives on purpose, or we can live our lives by accident. You can plan your life and live your plan, or you can simply let the flow of life events and circumstances sweep you down the river of time, taking you wherever it will. This is the quintessential example of go with the flow. The latter, sadly, is the way most people live their lives, by accident. The former, with a purpose, is how God created us to live, on purpose. Really? I wholeheartedly disagree. I've learned that life can be molded, but it can also be an experiment. I say we can live those accidents with purpose. Can any of you remember a happenstance that made you choose a path to reach a purpose? I can list 4 absolutely life-changing accidents. You see, this has been a long, drawn-out lesson for me. I'm now 60 years old, and I didn't truly know what my passion was for years. I think I know now. But heck, I didn't come from a family of planners. We didn't look at children to find their greatness. We were more a family of survivors. My parents and grandparents were as wonderful as they were, didn't possess the tools to guide us towards a goal. They came from cotton farmers and sharecroppers. They tended the orange groves. They were too busy working and taking care of us. None of them were well educated, and in fact, most hadn't made it past elementary school. My mom even attended strawberry school, which meant schools were closed during the strawberry harvest time in Florida. Her father, my granddaddy Hallman, Melvin, who I was named after, couldn't read, and there wasn't much writing past his signature. So I don't think there was a destined path for me. So, how did all this fabulousness, y'all know, happen? Right? My life has been a series of happenstances, AKA accidents, that allowed me to achieve the purpose at hand. Remember that old George Jones song, Accidentally on Purpose? That's how I discovered my superpowers. See, I recall being 5 years old, sitting in the woods, more like a swamp bog, near our home in Lakeland, Florida. Something told me from within that I didn't belong here, that my life should be larger. To be honest, I didn't even know what that meant, much less how to make it happen. So I went through my days and completed my schooling and had discovered my love of being a musician, but I also had no idea how to make a living doing that. So my music didn't follow me past high school and into adulthood. These accidents I mentioned that I purposefully chose to follow began when I was 18. I was working for my father doing road construction and absolutely hating it. Ugh. Yes, I knew I was way gay, but didn't have an outlet or path other than the stereotypical spots, and that needed to change or I would become lost in life. Living a life that was all around me, but that I didn't want. Like standing under a street lamp, but casting no shadow. So, accident 1. One night in the park, I met a man that had just gotten out of the US Navy. I cannot remember his name and barely his face. I don't even know if he survived the AIDS crisis of the 1980s, but I am eternally grateful. He told me about how many gay people were actually in the Navy. We shared a drink and he told me stories of his time at sea. He explained how you can hide in plain sight and be gay in the Navy, even though it was definitely forbidden. The very next morning, I walked out the door of my parents' house and signed papers to join the US Navy. The flipping US Navy, y'all, right? Ugh. My family practically begged me to reconsider, but that accidental meeting and my decision to join had a purpose. It was my pathway out of Lakeland. When I enlisted, I chose a career having zero clues what it was, and heck, it was in the field of electronics, and I knew they were happening everywhere, and I hoped I could learn something that would keep me out of Lakeland. Now, that decision about agreeing to be on submarines I made, I still don't know why I agreed to that, except I could be inducted in 2 weeks instead of waiting 3 months for a billet assignment opening. I just wanted to go before I chickened out or was talked into changing my mind. I didn't put any thought into what I would be required to do. And yes, there are more stories here, but for another time. So in the Navy I was, basic training in Orlando, close to home, then technical training and submarine school in Groton, Connecticut. I had never really been in snow except the time it snowed in Lakeland. Snow, yeah, right, more like slush for an hour or two, but I was now on my own, making new friends and some bad decisions while studying hard to get first pick at a good assignment. I learned to drive in the snow. I became a cigarette smoker. I became a pot smoker. I felt alive and I was becoming me. That studying landed me with my pick of the list, and I chose Pearl Harbor, Hawaii as my first assignment. Still wanting to fit in and hide in plain sight, I married and again didn't have any idea what I was doing except getting more money from the Navy and hiding in plain sight. We divorced and I married one of my best lesbian friends because I decided to re-enlist and still needed to hide in plain sight. Duty stations followed, and after 10 years, I chose to leave it all behind. But it all sprang from that one accidental meeting that I used for a purpose. Seems it turned out just fine. The next phase of my life arose from the choice I made after accident number 2. See, a civilian I had worked with on board my ship suggested he could get me a job. So I applied and I began working for Lockheed Martin in Great Neck, New York as an engineer traveling the world. I never turned down an assignment, no matter the location. It could be the Middle East or the middle of Oklahoma. It didn't matter. I didn't plan this. It was just another accident, but I ran with it on purpose. I needed to finally be free from the constraints of the Navy. I wanted to make a life where I wasn't required to hide in plain sight. Now transitioned into civilian life, and with 6.5 years of constant travel to places that were unimaginable when I was a boy, I decided I didn't want a 2-year overseas assignment in Taiwan, and I accepted a layoff. Then my best friend Ray and me, we drove up the coast of California, and then I returned to Florida to spend time with my parents. I helped Dad do some renovations and planted bushes and flowers for Mom. However, after a year, the bank account was running dry and I needed to return to work, but had no prospects or ideas of what I wanted to do. I was 36 years old. Then, voila, accident number 3. I ran across an article in Backpacker magazine for jobs in Yellowstone National Park. I had been camping with my family since childhood, but had never been out into the large wilderness of America. I'd always wanted to visit, and it sounded like fun. Getting to be there and experience our country's first great idea and make money? Hell yeah. So I applied and got a job as a boiler technician for the 1997 season. I worked at the Canyon Lodge and lived in the basement quarters with my other workers. My hiking adventures through the park, across the Tetons and into Montana, Idaho, and beyond, plus my boondock camping stories of traveling back and forth across America could be another topic. But my purposeful choice to act on that accidental sighting in the back of a magazine and fill out the application had achieved the purpose. I saw America. I saw places that most people on earth will never see except maybe on television. I drove through Utah and the Great Salt Lake. I ventured down to visit best friends in San Diego. I inhaled at Carlsbad Caverns and traveled up the coast of California to say hello to the redwoods. But fun time was over, and I wound up working for Gulfstream Aerospace in Savannah, Georgia for a while. My brother worked there, and it gave me an opportunity to spend some time with him. But the job didn't work out well, and I wanted out. I guess this must have radiated out into the cosmos somewhere, because shortly thereafter, but again by accident, my prior boss at Lockheed Martin tracked me down through my parents' address, and I returned to my job traveling the world. Again, without a home, no house, no apartment, and no rent. I eventually settled into a home base in Huntsville, Alabama, but I didn't spend but a few months out of the year there. So I kept a small 1-bedroom apartment, nothing fancy, just a place to respite. Then accident number 4. That was meeting John at the age of 48. An online meeting that should have been nothing, just a brief accidental exchange of a few words, but they changed my life in the most profound and amazing way. When we finally met, if he hadn't left his watch behind at my apartment and he needed to return and retrieve it, who knows? But since that accidental encounter, he has taken me from my single lone existence into me living my most joyous and fulfilled existence. Yes, I knew I loved cooking, but had no one to cook for. I knew I always wanted someone to share life with, but how could that happen with such a transient existence? I had yet to see my joy explode and bring that to others. I hadn't perfected them biscuits and gravy. I had never made a creme brulee. I had never planted my own flowers or vegetable garden. Even though I had been living a great life, what I didn't know was what happens when you have a partner that frees you. When you no longer breathe in the negatives of society and you begin to exhale. You refuse to stay hidden. You step into life and soar. And that's where I am now. I have John. I grow flowers. I plant a vegetable garden every year. I feed my family, friends, and neighbors when I can. We have a small business that helps sustain us, but I totally love doing it. We moved here to leave our separateness behind. Wherever we ended up, we wanted to be known as John and Mel, not John who knows Mel, and vice versa. No more separating in the department store because the people of our past no longer knew who we had become. I had no desire to hide in plain sight again. So we settled in Blue Ridge, and finally, I was living dreams I had never expressed even to myself. I had begun to realize the things that brought me true joy. It was then I knew that a life of accidental circumstances was my way of life. I understood that by purposefully choosing to follow the roads these accidents presented, I had become me. I didn't know if it's a new me. I do know that it took me a long time to get there. But these 4 accidental moments, each one just a speck of time in my life. But as you see, they helped create the entire time of my life. There was no grand purpose. Each step did lead me to the next, but there was no destination. I hadn't chosen a life of cooking and telling lies by the campfire. I didn't know that the person I was becoming would lead me anywhere. I'm tremendously grateful that it has. I now know what my passions are. I know what gives me joy. It may have taken me more than 50 years, but as I said when I began this new talk, a new year can bring a new you. I speak within myself every day that my friends and family learn this. It's my only wish for the new year. So you see, sometimes life happens accidentally, not planned or educationally driven, not forced upon you by a parent to follow their path, not shamed upon you from religious dogma. It takes shape as we go. It's never over. You can step outside today and begin a whole new you. You can make a plan or not. Just always, always remember that when that opportunity arises, think, should I step into this on purpose? Thanks.